XP-819 was a proposition given to the GM board by Frank Winchell, who was the director of R&D for Chevrolet. And as all of you know, any Corvette was Zora's territory. And Frank Winchell imposed upon Zora's territory, and he and Frank weren't the best of friends because someone else was messing with Corvettes. But this is what you're going to see and what you have in your hands is quite a bit of the presentation that the engineers used to the GM board to get additional budget to go ahead and build this vehicle. And there's a lot of pictures that were added after the fact by them because the car is built. But what's interesting in this car as an engineering car may or may not be beautiful. It may or may not have all the functionality into it, like the headlights don't work on this car. But what they look are different aspects of how they could build better cars, safer cars, less cost in building a car. And you can read all that in there. It's pretty explicit what they were trying to develop on this car. But what I'm going to show you is kind of different areas of this car's life. When it was finished at General Motors in 1969, and we have all the engineering books on it, it was given to Smokey Yunick, and he was supposed to destroy the car. So he took the car apart and did destroy sections of it. It was discovered years later by Steve Tate, a Chevy dealer out of Missouri, and when they put the car back together, they had no idea how to build the car. And you'll see in the pictures how bad the car was cut apart and what was done to it. And I was blessed. This car, there's always something in life. There's a reason this car belongs here at Mid-America Motorworks. Serve 2 was going up for sale, and with us owning Serve 1, a guy wanted Serve 2, so he and I kind of flipped a coin. Harry Yager, Harry. And I said, I'm not interested in Serve 2 because I don't want to go head-to-head with you. So if you want to buy it, you buy it. Harry bought Serve 2. This car went up for auction in 2002, and I was bidding on the car. I was bidder at $160,000. The next bidder bid $165,000, and they dropped the hammer on the guy at $165,000. So Harry Yager came up to me and said, why did you let that car get away from you? And I said, well, they sold it out from under me. And he said, well, I know the guy who bought the car. He's the owner of LA Gear. He's buying more cars than he needs. I'll just have him give you the ticket for that car. Obviously he did. So if I was at 160 and he was at 165, I knew what my number was, and it was higher than 165. I didn't know what the other guy's number was, but I ended up getting the car in a whale of a good deal as far as I'm concerned. When I bought the car in the July or August of '02, we're getting ready to do Corvette's 50th anniversary, and I got a call from Spatial Services, a group that does restoration and work for General Motors, and the guy says, I have a gift for you. And I said, are you going to be at Corvette's 50th anniversary? And I said, absolutely. I was chairman of the National Corvette Museum that year. And he said, well, I have a gift for you. And I said, well, any clue? And he said, well, I have the engineering proposal book and a lot of the blueprints on XP-819. And he said, I want you to have them. So I knew what I was going to get. So I took $5,000 cash with me and was going to reward this guy for giving me the book. So he gave me the book, so I'm thinking, oh my God, there's pictures here of this car that no one has ever seen outside of when they were originally photographed. So I handed him the envelope of $5,000. He opened it up and he said, what is this? I said, that's a thank you for that book. And he said, I didn't do this for cash, I did it for that car. And I knew that if you had the car, it would be done right. Well, obviously, I knew if I had the car and was going to have it done right, there was only one partner on that, and he happens to be up here with me today, meaning Kevin Mackay. So What I'm going to do, you can look at that book, and I'm just going to show you some pictures from my end up till we passed it off to Kevin. So this was just the beginning slide of the proposal. There's one of the engineering keys, and obviously the XP-819 decal. This is a shot of the car in the studio, 3/4 rear, just a typical glamour shot. There's an ad for this car. Steve Tate, Gallatin Motors. At that time, he said this car cost General Motors over $500,000. I would somewhat debate that. One of the interesting things, anybody know what a chaparral is? The rear steering knuckles just happen to fit a chaparral. Now, how would they just take a developmental car and make something that would just fit the chaparral? Or you think maybe they're trying to get something out to the race teams? We called the guys at, is it Rattlesnake Raceway? I think that's what they call it. These are the same wheels that ran on a chaparral. So just some interesting things that, General Motors was always trying to be in racing, even though there was a ban on racing. And there was ways to get product out to the teams. Wait a second, I'm going the wrong direction, guys. Here we go. There's a driving permit for XP-819. Basically, just some of the documentation. You can see here this car is out and running at 2.5 of 64. This is another, I'll get down so you can see. You okay? This is just some instructions to remove the car, and this is when they were getting ready to give it to Smokey Unique. They pulled it out of an aisle and a section to get it tuned up and ready to go. There is, if you can see that, is XP-819 and a 66 Corvette. What's interesting is that this 66 Corvette has the same interior in it that car does. If you look in your book, you will see it's got high back buckets, and there's a couple pictures of that 66 Corvette with this type of an interior in it, which I think is pretty interesting. A front profile of a 66 and XP. They're showing the side profile. You can see how much longer the car was in the rear versus in the front. One of the aspects that they were trying to develop on this car was how quick could a car be serviced? How quick could a car go into production with as few of engineering blueprints as possible? You'll see in the presentation book that many of the aspects of this car, chassis, were built in plastic, 1/8 scale, and then they went up and they tested the plastic pieces to find out fatigue areas, to learn different engineering and assembly processes before they ever went to the production car. And you just have to look at the time frame that this car was built in. Yes, they had computers, but not everything was computer modeled at that time. Well, a friend of ours, Joe Bortz, took a lot of the GM Motorama cars, found them at Warhoop's junkyard in the early 90s, and has rebuilt them. And if you look at what Joe started with, he started with a little bit more than we did with the XP, and he poured his heart and soul into getting these cars back on the road, and that's what the car looks like today. So if you can see how it was in the Warhoop's junkyard to the Biscayne that it is today, it's just you've seen the car, haven't you, Kevin?
Yes, I have, Mike.
So when they took this car apart, the body was lifted off of it, and you can see they cut it in half right in front of the rear transaxle. And the next slide should be, there's some of the pieces that this car came in when they found it in Smokey's garage. Half shafts, brakes, rotors, springs. That's the rear end of the car, another little section of it. There's the rear end with the engine sitting in it. So it was literally cut apart in a lot of pieces. And there is part of the body with the front suspension sitting in front of it. And again, this is how the car was extracted from Smokey Unique's garage, piece by piece. And no instruction manual included with it. It was just a pretty dissected vehicle. This is the front half of XP. You can probably make out the rack and pinion steering. And you'll see in the booklet that you have, one of the objectives of this car mission was to understand frontal impact and how it relates to a steering column. In 1964, they didn't exactly have rack and pinion steering as a normal feature on a Chevrolet product. And out of the steering column, which ends right at the firewall, as the shaft goes down to the rack, it's at a 38-degree angle. And what they were looking at is frontal impact, that it would fold the shaft and the steering column would stay intact, because most of us remember back in when we maybe had more hair or a little more energy at the end of the day, that steering columns were often involved in front of, or when a car was hit in the front end, a steering column would go through the occupant. Well, they were obviously trying to figure out a better way to build a steering column, and the answer on this car was the rack and pinion steering. And obviously that's a standard feature on most cars, most General Motors products today. The rear section, if you notice the area that was all jagged, would go back. This is the front, I'm sorry. No, that is the rear. That's the rear frame section, where the jaggedness is the part that no one knew. They cut like I said, they cut it right behind the seats and right at the firewall, and no one knew what the rest of that car looked like. So when we got the car and we took the body off the frame, there was 4 2x2 pieces of square angle iron that held the rear to the front, and it was pretty bad looking. The car was shown at Bloomington Gold in the mid to early 80s, and it didn't look the best because no one knew the correct geometry of the suspension or how to rebuild the car correctly. But looking at what Steve Tate started with, it was pretty much a disaster. There is the front and rear put together, laid out on the ground, and you can see there's a whole center section missing. And one of the things that I find interesting on this, it's on a future slide. This is with the body set over the top of the suspension. The cavity there is obviously where the engine would go into the car. And as a side note, they were trying to get an aluminum engine in this car. And there was one guy at Chevrolet that had the budget and control of all aluminum engines. And his name was Zora Duntov. And Frank Winchell, as director of R&D, pretty much pissed Zora off, so they would not give an aluminum engine to this car. And they knew when they built it, they had to take about 80 pounds out of the rear end of the car, which an aluminum engine would have done. But Zora wouldn't cut loose of any budget on it. So it was a typical corporate battle of trying to get this car built and developed. There is the original engine, which is in it today, which is a 350 horse small block marine engine. It runs in reverse, obviously, since it's sitting aft of the transaxle. The transaxle that's in it is an experimental Pontiac Tempest transaxle. Winchell was very involved in the Tempest program, so he obviously knew what to do for a transaxle and made it with the small block Chevy. Again, there's just a shot of the front of the car, the cowl, the front suspension. But you'll see either here or in your handout just how disassembled this vehicle was and how much effort had to go into just figuring out how to put it back together, let alone how to do it correctly. In this slide, if you can see these steel rails that they weld it together to hold the front and rear together. I can't imagine how this car must have driven, because with 4 pieces of angle iron, so to speak, holding the front and rear together, I don't think it would have been a real safe vehicle to take out and drive any place. There's a better shot of the black area in this slide, that's the center section, which would have and does now include the gas tank, which is in a bladder form contained within the structure or the backbone of this car. So when I got the brochure, this is the first time I had ever seen, or virtually anyone else outside of the developmental team, what this car looked like. And as we've gone through the restoration process, Kevin and I have decided to leave it in the chassis form. People keep asking, when are you going to finish the car? Well, once the car is finished, there's so much of the cool parts of this car you'll never see again because the body's going to set right down over the top of it. The radiator, I always find fascinating. Any C7 owners out here in the crowd? One of the cool things about the C7 Corvette, they were talking about the radiator laying forward and the air coming up and ducting out through the top of the hood and over the top of the car. Brand new on C7, right? Except they did it here. So, when you look at developmental cars and engineering cars, they're many times 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years in advance before they put it into production. This car has a clamshell hood on it. And the clamshell hood, as we all know, didn't come out till 1984. And what they were looking at on the hood, and you'll read that in the book, was crash safety and how inexpensive you could repair a car. So if you think of a C4, you have to unbolt the hood to take it off. On this one, you would tilt it forward and take it one detent back, and you could lift the whole front end of the car off. So looking at a frontal impact, repairing that would be cheap and quick, and that was something they were looking at. This car also has all urethane bumpers, front and rear. Urethane didn't come out in Corvette till 73, both sides in 74. And in reading the book, that was for absorbing part of the impact of a crash. I love reading this old historical stuff because as we think of cars today, how well engineered, how safe they are, and to think, well, they're going to put a urethane bumper on the back of a car so when it gets hit, it absorbs part of the impact, and then the fiberglass takes the rest, and then hopefully that's the end of the impact. But I thought it was interesting that this car has the urethane, the use of urethane many years in advance. This is a side profile. This is what Kevin had to use to start rebuilding the car and figuring out how the plumbing worked on the car. Not an easy job until we got pictures, but then what they do so well at Corvette Repair is they really are historians. They spend a lot of time looking at photographs, understanding the project that they're under. And I won't steal your thunder for the hours that you've billed me.
I'm glad you paid me, Mike.
In learning about this car, but the end result will be extremely well worth it. There's a rear shot, and this was something that puzzled Kevin and I when we looked at that. If you look at the shots, the exhaust manifolds are coming up, dumping into the muffler. Apparently this is when they built the chassis and hadn't got to the packaging side to say, how do we hang a rear end on this car, because it wouldn't work that way. So we got photographs of both that version as well as this version. This version will handle the rear end. That version, you couldn't get the rear end down on the car. This is a shot of one handsome car and two old men driving it down the highway.
That's a show, Mike.
You like that one?
I really do.
Yeah. This was the first time I had seen the car. This was at Pebble Beach.
No, Amelia Island.
Amelia Island, I'm sorry. At Amelia Island 3 years ago?
3 years ago. I think it was 2012.
Yeah. And that was kind of a cool day. We went for the first ride in the car. But I think that's... Oh, this is what I love. If you go back and look at the chassis, or look at it as it sets today with that center spline, and I've always thought, boy, this C4 sure looks like something that I've seen before. And if you look at the C4 chassis and look at what's here, you can see the developmental process, the thought process of how to build a vehicle. So here we show the clamshell hood on XP, not to be confused with a C4. So you go back, there's a clamshell, there's the C4. just a side profile. And I kept looking at this car, said, I've seen something that looks very, very similar to this car. And Larry Shinoda did the styling of this car. And all the designers, the stylists, I think they all get in a room like this and exchange notes, because history kind of exposes that everybody knew what everybody else was doing, because you see elements of someone's design on another brand of car. So I finally found one day, this is just to show a 68 Corvette, how it compares to XP, and there's the two cars. Well, Shinoda did the styling of both cars, directed by Harry Hage's studio at Chevrolet Design, but you see an extreme amount of similarity between the two, except that this car had to have a V8 hanging out its backside, to the point what we're showing here is that's a Porsche 904, and one of the slides shows it front to back of both cars, and the other one we just superimposed wheelbase to wheelbase. But you see an awful lot of similarity in the rear sail fins. Porsche obviously having a flat engine in there, had a lot less engine to worry about in the back of the car, and they actually mounted the engine over the transaxle, or midship, I guess, forward of the axle. But there's an awful lot of similarity to a 64 904 and XP-819. You just, I don't think I included this slide in the booklet you have, but they're very, very, very close in styling. Another great piece that we got was the fact that we got all these side views, all the illustrated views showing the packaging, how a driver would fit into the car. Just cool pieces. If you're into history and into what were they trying to do with this car, how do you build a car, these are some of the processes. And you can see the radiator. No, you can't. Never mind, you'll see it in your book. Again, another shot of the chassis of the car. And, you know, Kevin and his crew relied on these photographs heavily to figure out plating, positioning of all the different bolts, you name it.
Mike, without these photographs, I could never have done it. There's no question in my mind. That was a blessing you were able to get that book.
I could agree. Now, these are some historically shot, just so cool of shots. I mean, can you imagine a craftsman today wearing the smock as such and working on the parts of the car? But if you have a new Corvette, do you have any cool shots like this of your car being built? These are just priceless. And I have the name of all these guys. I've met some of the guys that built this car, and I sent them the photographs, and I said, by any chance, do you know who these gentlemen are? And they go, absolutely, we know who they are. Well, there's a shot in here you're going to love, beyond all of them, but this is a shot of the chassis in plastic, and they're looking at torsional stability and the flex of different control arms. And again, in reading the book, you'll see that they were trying to do this as cheap as they can before they went and built a one-off car. So kind of an interesting way to approach the design element, the engineering elements. Again, here I'm talking about XP-819's radiator, and you can see the big duct in the hood. And there's the C7 Corvette when they said, we've got something brand new in this car, that we're going to bring the air in the bottom, flow it through the radiator, and exit the top of the hood and put the heat over the top of the car. I'm going, okay, I think I've seen that before. But I mean, that's what General Motors invest in. When you're building a design car, an engineering car, you're trying to study something for the future. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's grabbed almost instantly, and other times it's generations before it goes back. And when you talk to, I probably will step on someone's toe, but when you talk to certain engineers, I brought up these facts, and they don't like to, oh no, we designed that, we thought that up all by ourselves. I went, okay. That's just the bird cage of this car. A lot of safety features built into it. The side frame rail is about at the hip level of the passenger. the doors have a safety bar in them. And it was not until 1973 that safety bars, 78 or 70. When did they put the bar in the door of the C3?
Oh, it had to be late 70s, Mike.
Yeah.
Late 70s.
But they were looking at impact bars in the center of doors on XP in the mid-60s. The other thing that was interesting in this car is that half of the seat is built into the door panel of the car. So what you're missing on either side is the outer bolster. But when you sit in the car, you can turn on the seat, put your feet firmly on the ground, and stand straight up out of the car. And the door hinges have a slight bit of articulation that lifts the door up ever so much. They were trying to get as close to an 8-inch curb as you could and open a door and be able to put your feet down on an 8-inch curb or 8-inch high curb and stand straight up. And I did reread this book, Kevin. This car does have they had designed that rear window to go up and down.
Oh, they did?
Yeah. And I've read that book, that proposal book, multiple times, and I found it the other day. I'm going, how could I overlook that? Because we were talking about how do we handle the rear window. So the rear window, just like on the C3, the 68 to 72, was operable. On the production cars, you could take it out, but on this car, they were looking at sliding it up and down for ventilation. Another interesting thing on this car is that the rear view mirrors, we found them mounted high and mounted low. And I think one of the cool things, whether it be a race car or a developmental car such as this, you just pick a point in its development, and that's what you restore it to, because it's a test mule. They didn't make it say, this car is perfect. Every time they took it out and worked on it, they changed something, because that was the purpose of the vehicle. It's got 2 different steering wheels in it over a period of time. The seats are fixed. It was a early generation telescopic column. They were bragging about 7 positions on the tilt and 6 inches of travel. And the brake pedal and accelerator are on a slide, and they used an old Cadillac power seat motor to slide the pedals forwards and backwards. And another interesting fact is that they put a balancing, some kind of a load balancer, for lack of better terms, on the brake booster. That you'll read in the proposal book that they said, you keep 1 foot on the brake pedal and 1 on the accelerator, and you pay attention to driving. And if you need to brake the car, you simply stomp on the pedal. Well, I'm looking around at my audience here, and most of us did have driver education, and they always said keep your foot off the brake pedal. Or this one, they're saying keep your foot on it. You will not activate the brakes until you push on it. I think that's kind of a fascinating little piece of history. There is the 66 with the XP style interior in it. Wouldn't you like to have that car, Kevin?
I have no idea where that is, Mike. I'd like to find it, though.
And you probably will. Well, this is, to me, is just the money shot. This is this car on a surface plate being built piece by piece, and the piece that runs down the center of the car is just the profile of the car that they put over the top of the car as they were building the aluminum and wood pieces to get the design into the car. And then later they hung the fiberglass over, built that into some of the fiberglass. Some of it they did not use, and then they built the fiberglass based on the structure that we see here. So that was a relatively quick kind of taking the car from where it started, different things that they were trying to do with the XP, the shape that it was in when Steve Tate found it. At least when it went to Corvette repair, it was in kind of sort of one piece.
Well, I'm going to talk about that very soon, Mike.
So this is just kind of a highline view of what we found on this car, and what people go through. And what's important to me in looking at what Joe Bortz did with the Biscayne, we've got the same vehicle today. And when I bought this car, Joe called me and he said, Mike, he said, those of us that appreciate these one-off cars, whether they be engineering, styling, or developmental cars, he said, I'm just going to tell you, we own the Picassos of the automotive world. And he said, you think of all the artists, and you think of the top of the best. And he said, well, these were the artists at General Motors, at Chrysler, whatever experimental, developmental car they had. Because he said, these were the guys that were trying to push the envelope, change how cars are made, change concepts. We were talking this morning about rear engine Corvettes. And, you know, Zora's been after them for years. Certainly General Motors had looked at them for a large number of years. And I think it's kind of cool that we have Serv 1 and XP, two of the about a half a dozen rear-engine Corvettes just set here in Effingham. And sometimes I take my cars for granted because I've owned them a long time. And then I get the opportunity to kneel in front of a bunch of our guests and talk about what drives me to take the time, effort, dollars, energy, emotion. What else do we put into these? Our heart and soul.
Passion.
A lot of passion. And if there aren't people that will take the risk to do what a lot of us do on these old cars, they disappear. And, you know, I see a lot of C7 owners, a lot of new Corvette owners, and you talk about the history of the car, and kind of hate to say that they're clueless, so I'll just say maybe they're clueless. But, you know, the history of what drove this car, from the passionate guys and gals that did the engineering and the design and fought the battles. And I understand the battle between Frank Winchell and Zora was relatively monumental, but they still pushed the envelope. So as soon as they got Frank Winchell out of the picture, this is 819, they went to 880 and the blue Aerovet, which was Zora's. So they took whatever they learned on this car, and they definitely knew this car had a 69-31 front to rear weight ratio. But what they were looking at was a low center of gravity, putting the fuel in the center of the car for safety, and an aluminum engine, and they would have got the car under 60-40 front rear split. This car pulled almost a G on the skid pad. They did that in the C4. But this car, one of the mistakes they made on the car, they had asked that the front and rear tires be substantially different. They wanted bigger tires on the back and smaller on the front, hoping that the torque and the horsepower would not lift the front, that it would spring the car forward. Again, some of those elements are in the presentation booklet that I gave you. So, Kevin, I'm going to let you take the rest of this and show the magic that you've worked on this car.
My name is Kevin Mackay. I own a company for over 30 years called Corvette Repair Incorporated in Valley Stream, Long Island, New York. Anyone from Long Island here? I'm the only one from Long Island? I can't believe it. Okay. Well, I've been in business now for over 30, almost going my 31st year. I have an 11-man crew there. I've been very fortunate and blessed to deal with some really very gifted, talented craftsmen over the years, and I love a challenge. We've been very, very fortunate to have Mike give us the opportunity to work in this car. And boy, challenge it was. We worked on some pretty significant cars along the way, but by far, this was the most difficult, most challenging I've ever experienced. And this one I'll take to my grave, for sure. Now, the photographs that you're about to see, Mike has never seen before. This is just a little test, a little taste. No, you paid for it, Mike. You paid for it, okay? I had over 4,000 photographs of this particular part of the restoration. Why? Because I didn't know anything about this thing. I mean, it's like, you know, it's a C1, C2, C3, or C4 Corvette, which we've worked on many of them. This is a one-of-a-kind vehicle. So I had to make sure I had so many photographs. I'd rather have too many than too little. So we took photographs of every angle in this car when we got it, and even during the process of taking things apart, I said, well, I hope we can remember putting this thing back together again, and not to lose anything. Very important, Mike. Here it is. The day came to Long Island, New York, to Corvette Repair. And by the way, I want to thank my crew, because without your team, you're nothing. And that's so important to me. You're only as good as your team, and that's like that with any business. But I've been very, very fortunate. My guys are with me. I have some guys with me 20 years, some guys with me 15 years. My newest guy's been there 7 years. So we're like a family. We treat each other very well, with respect, and we have a lot of fun, a lot of yelling, a lot of screaming, but we have fun. Here we are taking out of the can we see back there all right? Okay, am I in anyone's way? Maybe I'll just crouch down here real quick. Let me get my little tester thing out here. Okay, here we go. Now I'm gonna random. No, I don't have 4,000 photographs today, guys, because if we did, we'll be here till midnight tonight. We'll probably miss the concert. So I'll just give you a little taste. I got about 260 photographs here. I just want to go through it quickly. Okay, here it is. Well, it's a little light here, but this is when the car first came to us. It's a complete car, interior. If you notice some here, I'm noticing things around here that's kind of bugging me. You see the fit here? Kind of like a bulge on this side over here. See how it is? It's a little bit higher here, and again it gets lower, a little bit of a swoop. So things like that's bugging me. And I'm a pretty particular kind of guy. I like to do things a certain way. Here's some of the wiring. You can see how things were. I'm just looking at it, taking a lot of photographs, just trying to study it, see what I get myself into. That's the rear. That's the headlight section of the car. Okay, here we are, just taking some photographs of it to find out where everything belongs. That's the front suspension, the upper Aeon. Front fan, where the radiator is. Now check out the gaps. I wasn't too impressed with the gaps. I could literally, honestly, fit this 2x4 between there, between the nose section and the door. I mean, it was that bad. And one thing, I think Mike may know this, but when Steve Tate first got this car and first restored it, he worked on it day and night to bring it to Bloomington. And I think it was in the early 80s or mid 80s. But he took it there twice. The first time he took it there, he was on his way there. He's probably about maybe 15 miles away from Bloomington. And he gets to the parking lot of Bloomington. He gets out of the truck. He looks back. The car's gone. It's missing. Well, I know I saw it about 15 miles ago. Somehow the straps got loose. The car fell off the back of the trailer and went down an embankment. And he followed his steps back and he found the car. After all that, did you know that, Mike? True story. You can't make this stuff up. Okay, here we go. Okay, so here's some of the gaps of the car. It's pretty overdone, the gaps, I would say. Okay, here's some of the fit. Like I said, this is really one of the test cars for the urethane front and rear bumpers. More gaps. Now, besides the gaps, look at that one. I can always put my foot in there. Wasn't too impressed with that. So here we are. Here's John. John's been now for 21 years. And like I said, we're a bunch of characters in New York. I'm from the New York area. Here he is stripping all the stuff off it. Layers of paint on the car. Here he is smiling. He's smiling now because he's just started the project. Here we are. It's kind of seeing this, but now it's completely stripped down. There were so many repairs. We're not talking about hundreds, but thousands of stress cracks throughout this whole thing. There were cracks coming through the paint that we've decided to just reskin the whole entire car. We put double layers of fiberglass on the car.
They actually hit a wall at the proving grounds in this car. At the Black Lake area, they spun it and hit a wall with it, so
they did.
That's part of the repairs.
Okay. Well, in this picture here, actually a little light, but there's a sheet of fiberglass here, in this area here, that John, my main guy, is putting it on, glassing it up, layering it again. Front section, wow, these are really light. That's a headlight section, front nose section here. You can see here we're glassing up all around here, getting all nice sharp lines all the way around the body here. That's the rear section. Now the rear section, actually, this insert in here is out of a 65, 66 big block Corvette, which is really, really cool. It's like a little bit of like the hood bulge, they call it. Here we are glassing up again. And like I said, here's the rear section of the car. Okay. More rear sections. Every piece of fiberglass on this car here, this is really light. What I'm basically over here, there was so much plastic in the car, there was just a mound of Bondo right here. Here we are now. That's the passenger door of the car. It's just stripping we should strip the lower level of it already. There's cracks here all over the place, no matter where we turn. And I think, something, I don't want to miss any cracks, because what complements a good paint job is the bodywork before the preparation. So we figure we just double layer sheets. Let me go back here a little bit. You see there was pot rivets still in the door area, which we had to remove all the rivets, drill everything out nicely. These are really light. Okay, now here's the car coming in now, because what we did was what's nice about this particular car, we took the front nose clip off, put it on the horse, and started doing all the body work on it. Then we took the doors off the car and did that. Then we did the roof. Then we did the rear, tail section of the car. Now we're going to do the middle structure.
Hey, Kevin, how many hours do you think your glass people have in this car?
Oh, I think we had approximately 4,000 man hours already, besides the 4,000 photographs that we took on the car. The body on the car is completed. So once we get the chassis back, we want to remate it to the body and check our fit one more time. Because right now we have everything just hung on horses and on tables right now. But that's our next step, really. But yeah, about 4,000 man hours, Mike.
And Kevin charges $15 an hour
Yeah.
for those 4,000 hours. I'm almost sure that was what I saw on the bill.
Yeah, you're close, Mike. Hope you guys don't believe him.
No, but you just got a lot of business, Kevin.
Okay. Okay. All right, here we are, just stripping the back of the car. And there's just, you can see there's layers of paint after paint job after paint job after paint job. That's the rear section of the car on these little bit lights. Now these things here actually, whoever painted the car never really sanded it properly. We just literally took a razor blade and we took the paint off in literally sheets. So there's actually 2 strips of paint and a sheet that was lifted by a razor blade. They're the doors now, they've been reglassed already. Now we're starting taking apart the interior of the car. You see the shape of the seat, door jamb area, lock mechanism. Real unusual. These are like mid-year Corvette female lock latches for the hood, which were customized in engineering, and they were actually fitted inside the body. We are taking it apart now. It's on the lift. Real unusual thermostat housing area. A little vent to it. Interior shot. Let's see. We have it on a jig which turns at 360 degrees because this, like I said, we had to go through this car from top to bottom, in and out, front to back. We are now just putting sheets of glass, grinding it, put another sheet of glass on it just to eliminate all the cracks so nothing to come back and haunt us later on. Here's where the latch was. That was all, had stress cracks all around this area here, so we just reglassed everything there. This is really unusual. This is the heater box area. This is a pretty much stock heater box area, which you see it's like on an angle. Well, that's how it's put inside the interior of the car. That's the way it was. But this is all hand-laid fiberglass. This is done in engineering. And it's dated, actually, Mike, this is dated. It says Harrison here, 64B. So this piece was built February of 1964. Here's a latch area now, being molded. Another sheet of glass over here on the front of the car. Another sheet of glass. Now we're fitting in the latches for the area that we just repaired. More sheets of glass over here. This is the whole file area. We completely stripped that thing down. That thing was hit up pretty hard. That's both sides. You can see this is the interior of the car. All stripped down. The underbody of the car, that was just tons of plastic and Bondo and cracks all over the place, stripping that all down. Okay, here we are on its side. Doing more repair work, glass work. There's more cracks all around the floor area here. Stripping down. Now we're sanding it smooth. And what we did was we just put the body back on the chassis one more time. Now we're going to work on the gap area here. Now we got pretty much all the panels have been reglassed, double coats of fiberglass on it. Now we're trying to fit everything nicely. We put the urethane bumper back on the car. Now we're tidying up the gaps here on the door area of the front fender. You see now the gaps are a little bit tighter now. More sheets of glass. There it is. Big difference in the lines, guys, right? Now you don't have to put my foot in there anymore. Nice and tight lines. Now we're using like a Sufco spray polyester which is like liquid bodywork out of a gun. Get all the waves out of it, tape up the interior. Here we are spraying in the spray booth as John spraying the car. These are really light. Okay. Here we are now doing the underbody of the car. Okay, more underbody. Sanding it down again, blocking it out. There's John, he's doing the doors of the car. All of the nose pieces, rear clip, doors, and so on. There's the rear clip. On the body of the car again, all done in spray polyester. Now, very, very light here. Let's see if I get a better picture of it here. What we're doing now, we're making molds of the seat because we knew that the seat was part of the body. So we came up with an idea, goes, wow, how are we going to make these seats mounted to the chassis so we're going to make it drivable and functional for the street? So John came up with an idea, let's just make a mold of the seats. So that's what we did. So here we are making the molds out of it, putting layers of glass on it, put the wax down, pop the seats out. Now we're doing the bodywork is all done. We're just putting that away in storage for now since we're doing the chassis. Now the chassis work begins. Believe it or not, the chassis was probably approximately about 1.5 inches too short. So we had to lengthen the chassis on it because you see here, the center of this was off-centered. So we had to actually just stretch it out a little bit to make it work, and we're able to do that. Now we're starting thinking about the chassis, taking it apart. Like Mike said, that's the original engineering motor in the car. See how offset that was? And it was cracks and plastic everywhere. A lot of rot. This is actually a crack, actually, right here. Things weren't even in right here. This was all falling apart here. I mean, if we would have driven this thing, the thing would have broken in half pretty easily.
It did break in half when.
Well, yeah, well, that's true. Okay. Okay. A lot of pieces here we had to remake. We basically put new steel in. We reskinned the whole. Once we did all the work on the stress cars, we completely reskinned the whole chassis. That's one of the coil springs. We're measuring out, make sure that it's all square and true, that's not twisted or bent at all, and worked out well. More plastic and Bondo and cracks. Here we are reskinning the chassis, making each piece. Now we're just welding it back, spot welding it all in place here. Like I said, the whole entire chassis was completely reskinned. More cracks here. Here we are welding it in place now, bending it nicely. Doing the whole top section of the car. Now this part here, I'm just going to get a better picture of it here. You see that piece right there? The gas tank is inside the chassis, the wishbone chassis. And we were smart enough to just put compressed air in it and make sure that thing was going to hold the fuel. And we hear like a psss. There was a leak, and that's a screw right into the top of the fuel, I guess the fuel tank. So here we're trying to find a leak, so we had to start cutting up the chassis again to try to find a leak, and we found it right here. So we were able to repair that. There's the hole right there. And now we welded the whole thing over because you can't get that, you'll never get that fuel tank out of the car unless you cut the tank, unless you cut the chassis in half because it's actually internal. Now it's all re-welded here. The strength. You know, I mean, the hoses were just completely deteriorated inside, a lot of rust and scale. We got all new hosing for it, of course. Redid all the plumbing on the car. This was actually rubbing, so we actually notched this out nicely so it would clear. And that worked out really well. There's some rot here in the chassis we fixed. I can't see the picture at all here. Now we're putting the body back in the car just to check everything one more time. Still doing some fabrication, some welding. Still reskinning the sheet here. We repaired all in this area here. It was all pretty much mangled. This is one of my other guys with me for about 15 years, doing a little grinding and welding. Put a whole other new section in here on top, reskinning the whole chassis like we talked about. There's done. Now we're doing the front section. Now these are the engineering prototype shocks with special numbers on it. They say XD-23474. Pretty cool. Side of the chassis. Here we are now. Now we're starting to fit. So the chassis was pretty much, structural-wise, was safe, square. Everything was repaired. Now we're fitting all the components back in the car to make it functional for the street. We made up this bracing on it to take care of the steering column, the pedal controls. A lot of, fit, put back, refit it again, put back, refit it again. There's the chassis pretty much ready for. We put a skin coat of the stuff called vet bond, or all metal we use a lot of. Here we are now, putting in the lines in, fitting all the lines. Everything was redone. Straightening. Here we are putting the whole bracing set up here that could also fit the seat. These are your pedal controls. Here's the piece. You can see it here. Just before we send it out to the powder coater, everything was fitted nicely. Chassis is going in the spray booth. Doing our all metal and vet bond, taking a lot of the waves out of it. We sprayed it with a spray polyester, blocked it out, resanded it. These are all the parts going to the powder coater, all suspension parts, front and rear. Here it is going right for the powder coater. There's the chassis back in the spray booth. We are priming it now. Checked it again, sanded down again, reprimed it again, sanded it again, repainted it. Here's the bracing setup back from the powder coating. Fixed the dent in the oil pan. Here we are assembling the chassis together. Put all the new ball joints in, all the bushings in. A lot of the bushings we try to match up as best we can, because this stuff here, like I said, is a lot of it's one of a kind. We got it from different cars, Chrysler, Ford, whatever. We started matching up. I drove my parts guy absolutely crazy trying to get some of the bushings and sleeves that we needed. A lot of stuff had to be custom made. Here we are assembling together. Coil spring shocks, all custom made brake lines. This is a Pontiac Tempest transaxle. I found a guy that was 87 years old that was able to handle that. He goes, yeah, I think I did 2 or 3 of them back in the 60s. I mean, who knows anything about these transaxles? I don't. So we had to send out to a specialist. It worked out really, really well. I mean, it's the original component that came in the car back then in 66. Now here is on an engine stand, just going through it, detailing it nicely, resealing everything nicely. Put that back in the chassis. Here's the seat. We took a mold out of the body. Put the motor back in. Here it is, putting it together. Now, in here is pretty cool here. This car here is the Pininfarina Corvette that sold at Barrett Jackson back in 2008 for $1.8 million. This is a 1956 Sebring number 3 car. And this car here is the 1965 development see-through Corvette that we built. And like I said, this is what Mike talked about the radiator, how it's mounted, basically laying down. We found that a duplicate motor, actually, Mike. The motor was completely cooked on the car. We actually found the motor that was actually perfect, and we even straightened out the fan. It was pretty bent. Here it is, getting ready for go to Amelia Island, and here it is in front of the shop. And that's when Mike first saw it back in Amelia Island, 2012. So. It worked out well. A lot of news people were there. We just had a blast doing it, and that's my presentation, guys. I hope you guys have any questions.